This is One-on-One. Steve Adubato coming to you from the State Senate chamber in the Statehouse in Trenton. We're here with State Senator Kevin O'Toole. Good to see you, Senator.
Good to be here. Thank you.
We're here on the 24th of February, big day. Explain the context of the budget address by the governor, which is coming up at 2 o'clock this afternoon.
Sure. It's a constitutional requirement that each year on this appointed day, at an appointed hour, the governor address the legislature, the Senate, and the Assembly, and give his or her budget address. So we're looking forward to hearing from Governor Christie.
So it's interesting, you know, there's always something happening in the state that impacts the budget, that impacts the fiscal health of the state, but something really big happened about 4 o'clock yesterday, and even though we try not to date what we do, what has happened by Judge Mary Jacobson, the ruling that she has made regarding the pension payment that must be made by the state of, I believe, $1.6 billion?
1.56.
Okay, thank you for being so exact, Senator. $1.56 billion that the state must put into the pension fund. Game changer?
I don't know if it's a game changer. Look, at the end of the day, constitutionally, the governor presents his budget. The legislature then owns it. This is now our budget. If it's curious that the judge rendered her opinion last night on the eve before the budget address. If she's suggesting we're going to have to make $1.56 billion in cuts from this day until June 30th, I just don't know how you do that unless you close every door and, furlough every employee. I just don't think it's possible. I suspect the governor will appeal it, and I'm sure the Supreme Court will probably step in at some point in time.
But explain that. I mean, you're a lawyer. You understand the constitutional process. The Constitution of 1947 is what in fact, the judge referred to some extent and said that the governor had a responsibility to fund this. But the reality is the appeals process is going to play itself out. From a practical point of view, for the voters who are not that interested in the appeals process, not that interested in the constitutional interpretation of this, Senator, you understand this from a dollars and cents point of view. You represent the 40th legislative district. Tell everyone where that is, by the way.
Sure. It's Essex County, Passaic County, Morris County, and Bergen County, 4 counties.
And those are folks, 200,000 plus, if you will, constituents, who could potentially be affected by this, as would all the constituents in the state. How so?
Well, first of all, listen, at the end of the day, we have a requirement to have a balanced budget. And
by the Constitution.
By the Constitution. And a few years ago, the legislature said we're going to have like a 7-year phase-in of total pension payments. It should be 2.5 or 2.6 billion. The reality is, given the recession we were in back in 2008, creeping up through 2011-12, revenues have been down, so it's been difficult to try to realize some of those savings. Despite the fact that the governor doesn't get credit, he has put more investment, dollar for dollar, in this pension system than any other governor. As a matter of fact, collectively over the last 5, soon to be 6 years, he will have put more money into this pension system, real dollars, than the last, I think it's 5 governors combined. And I think the problem is, Steve, that is for years, Democrat, Republican governors have neglected, and legislatures have neglected the fact that we had to truly fund this pension system. And it's always been a political charge to, I think Governor Corzine coined the term kicking the can down the road, and they've done that. This governor has seized the opportunity, worked with a bipartisan legislature in 2010, realized $120 billion in savings with pension reform. That's really a huge step in the right direction. Now, and now we're growing our receipts in the pension fund at about 7.5%, 8%.
But the judge said not enough.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunate she said that.
Does she have the final ruling on this?
I don't think she does.
You don't?
I think the Supreme Court will have the final ruling. And again, what's the state's ability to pay? I mean, we just can't print money in the basement of the State House and
what about I'm sorry for interrupting, Senator. The Democrats, and we're going to be speaking to in this series, we're interviewing legislative leaders, which Senator O'Toole is one of the ranking members in the Republican Party. He is a leader on the Judiciary Committee and understands fiscal issues as well, better than most. Senate President Sweeney's going to sit in that chair in just a few minutes when we sit and talk with him, and he's going to say, wait a minute. The governor, you heard him say this, he's going to say the governor broke the deal. The governor reneged on his promise to put in X number of dollars, state dollars, into the pension fund after public employees kicked in their part. Mm-hmm. You say...
There's only, because the revenues were down, He was only allowed to put in
state revenue coming in.
State revenue down. He was putting in $700 million. Again, a significant investment. We read that he's going to be putting in, I think it's 1.3 or 1.4 billion in fiscal year 16. Again, he's put more dollars in than any other governors before him. The problem is now it's accumulating. It's aggregating.
Is it out of control?
It certainly is. All the neglect from the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, the failure to properly fund this pension system, and perhaps we've had a debate as to what's the proper balance. So at this time, if the Democrats want to say raise the taxes,
they're going to say raise the millionaires tax.
Then that's their
governor
solution.
Says no.
I think the governor's been pretty clear about that.
And so have you.
I think I've been pretty clear about that. I think
you say no.
Listen, the reality is when under Corzine, we had more tax increases, we had more job flight. We lost, I think it's 100,000 jobs. Under Governor Corzine, when he left, unemployment was at 10.1%. Right now it's at 6.2%. No taxes over the last 5 years under this leadership. We've created over 150,000 private sector jobs. We're going on the right path. We're creating jobs, creating revenues, but it's not fast enough for some.
So you say no tax increase. Therefore, since revenue can only come, or balancing the budget, or finding a way to put this 1.56 billion with a B. I mean, try to put that in context, folks. Senator O'Toole is saying, look, you and your colleagues, particularly the governor, an important colleague in this state, the most powerful constitutional governor in the country, he's not going to sign a millionaire's tax, so let's be candid about this. You are challenging your Democratic colleagues, and if I'm wrong, you'll tell me. You're saying come up with budget cuts. You're saying come up with budget cuts to make up the difference, because we are not going for a millionaire's tax or any other tax. Are you not saying that?
There's two options. One, they can pass their tax and they can override, presumably this governor will veto it.
Which isn't going to happen.
Well, listen.
They've never overridden the governor before, and it's not going to happen.
Well, the Mets haven't won a pennant in a long time, but it may happen. Who knows? It's possible. There's talk of the override. But beyond that, if they want to target other transportation, education, municipal aid,
cuts,
hospital. Yeah,
cuts.
They have to, listen, it's the Hobbesian choice. At some point, you have to make a difficult decision. There's only so much money. Whether it's 30 billion, 31, 32, 33 billion, there's only so much money to go around. Here's what I've learned on the Budget Committee, Steve, for the last 15 years. If you doubled the state budget, if you made it 65 or 70 billion dollars, you can't solve every ill that we have in New Jersey. You can't fund every school, every problem, fill every pothole. You've got to prioritize. You can only do so much with the revenues that the people can afford to give at the state level. We just can't. We've overtaxed them. You saw all this flight, this economic flight, Steve, that has gone out of the state for years. We're stopping some of that. We're retaining some of our citizens now and our residents.
Senator, let me shift gears, because we'll be talking about this fiscal crisis with virtually every one of your colleagues. But I want to talk to you about an issue that I believe is unique to you and your district. There's a young woman from your district. Her name is Madison Holleran.
Yep, Holleran.
University of Pennsylvania, tragically committed suicide. Had a big impact on you and others, and you've acted on this. Talk about it.
Yeah, as you say her name, I will tell you, I get goosebumps, Steve. It's so emotional. My son is a senior at Seton Hall Prep. He's going to college in the fall. My daughter is a sophomore in high school. You become more acutely aware of what's happening. There's an alarming rate of suicide and suicide attempts at our colleges. Our kids, Steve, your kids and my kids. And I think, there's not enough being done. So one of the things we want to do in her name is try to get the higher education, the colleges, the institutions, to have a full-time, 24-hour allowance of having a hotline, a suicide hotline. They need to talk to somebody. That generation, my son's generation, either because they email, they text, they Skype, they do their Instagram, they don't have a lot of human contact. They need more of that, either with their parents, peers, someone they trust. I want to encourage that conversation, and it's a step in the right direction.
It's not in place now, Senator?
It's not mandated. It's not mandated that all the schools, the colleges have a hotline, suicide hotline, 24 hours.
What would it do?
Trained. I think if we publicize it, it'll train our kids. First of all, we're talking about suicide. I think you need to have that roundtable discussion. And we always say not in my family, not in folks that we know, in the neighborhoods we grew up in, Steve, in Essex County. But the reality is suicide and attempts at suicide at that level is happening in every neighborhood, whether it's in yours or mine, or whether it's in Cape May. We have to have this discussion with our kids. And I don't think we all talk enough to our children. And I think this opens the dialogue, gives them a safety net, and talking about if they're really feeling that uncomfortable. You know, I was watching the Oscars the other night, and the individual one for the Oscar for screenwriting talked about how he tried to commit suicide when he was 16 because he felt weird. He felt like he was a geek, and he said, "I'm here now." He says, "I have this statute," he goes, "and I want to pay it forward," essentially is what he said. "I want to tell you, all of you folks, if you don't feel normal, you feel like you're a geek, you feel like you're a nerd, I will tell you you'll fit in sometime."
That had an impact on you?
Absolutely did. I think a lot of kids, we all feel uncomfortable in our skin at some point in time, Steve. I suspect you might have. We all have.
Sure.
And I think, you know, we articulate it perhaps now more as grown-ups. I think our kids don't connect enough, again, having enough of the contact to say, you may feel special or different or weird. You're going to go through it. You're going to find your niche in your life. And that's part of having a dialogue with our kids. And I'm hoping we do that at the higher education level.
And by the way, that legislation has been introduced. Is it moving?
We're talking with our peers about trying to get as much bipartisan support. But when you talk to legislators, and it's one of those Republicans, Democrats, it doesn't matter. We all relate to it. We all have a friend of a friend who knows, who has had an attempt made, or they're talking with their kids who know somebody who's had.
Final question, sir.
Sure.
And we all wish you, and more importantly, those who are suffering, the best, because I know this is an important cause. In the last couple of years, just say with Governor Christie likely running for president 2016, here in the Statehouse, we're in the Senate chamber, we're talking to legislative leaders, both sides of the aisle. What's it going to be like here with the governor doing what he's doing nationally, but trying to keep a hand on what's happening here in the state? What's it like for you and your colleagues, particularly on the Republican side?
Well, listen, I think he's not only trying, he remains here, and there's much ado about him flying away, whether he was the chairman of the RGA or being a
Republican Governors Association,
or being sought out as a speaker on the circuit for Republican candidates. And whether he does or he doesn't, I don't know whether he's going to run or he's not going to run.
By the time this airs, he may have announced, but go ahead.
He remains to be our governor, and I suspect for the next 3 years, virtually 2 years and 11 months, he will be our governor.
You don't think it makes much difference in terms of what you and your colleagues do down here?
I don't have any sense that things have changed one iota from a year ago or 2 years ago. He remains in charge. We hear from his top staff. We hear from him. And look, it's a partnership. He and the Senate President and the Speaker are working together. And I will tell you, from what I gather, it seems like this Speaker, this Senate President, and this Governor seem to have a very good communication relationship right now. I think it's working. It'll continue to work for the next 3 years.
Well, Senator Kevin O'Toole represents the 40th Legislative District, but also represents a whole range of others, as he's one of the leaders in the Republican Party in the Senate. We thank you for your time.
Good.
Appreciate it. Today's a big day. The governor is going to be talking about his budget, and there'll be lots of discussion about that with the pension decision made by Mary Jacobson, Judge Mary Jacobson. But who knows what happens with that court decision. And I want to thank the senator. Appreciate it. We'll be right back right after this.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence. And 13 for WNET. Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by Barnabas Health, the New Jersey Education Association, TD Bank, NJ Best, Fedway Associates, Community Education Centers, the Northeast Regional Council of Carpenters, and by these public-spirited organizations, individuals, and associations committed to informing New Jersey citizens about the important issues facing the Garden State, and by Employers Association of New Jersey,